Good morning. My name is Don Vivrette, and this is It's Your Money. We are in week 5. If I share this for just a moment here, since we're all so organized, there it is. This is week 5. We're going to talk about medical care planning. Okay. There is, as we've said before on the website, you can bring up a copy of this. It's a workbook that we put together. It just sort of is a theme that carries through the various issues that we talk about in terms of It's Your Money. There's also one there for It's Your Estate. We are currently on week 5, doing medical care. Because of shifting schedules, that's in week 5 this time, and it does show that on the website as to where it is. So where we stand at this point is I'm going to stop sharing. And Pete, would you like to say anything for week 5 before we begin? No, you don't need to. Are you?
Yeah, it's financial and estate literacy. We're a not-for-profit, and Michael, come on board, and because Michael is going to be our presenter today, and we're going to say goodbye to Don.
And Don is going to go away, and he's going to follow the Q&A and see if there are any issues in there, and then I get to be the voice of God and ask the questions as we go along. So, bye.
Please, I encourage you to ask questions. So Don will pass them on to us, or he could answer them for you. Michael is a different kind of animal. To the financial world. And he has a profession that's new to the world. Michael, talk a little bit about what you do, and I'm hoping you have a slide of your book too, or we could talk a little bit about your book as well. But tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're important.
Well, I help people deal with things that they don't want to deal with. I mean, it's that certainly you have the similar situation with people not wanting to deal with their finances and put things in place. Well, my situation is a little bit more dire, because if you don't take care of the things that I'm going to suggest you take care of, it will determine the quality of your life as you go through the last chapter of your life. Just one kind of side comment. Why do I always have to follow this woman with all these beautiful pets?
I know, but you're kind of, your humanity. That's what we're all about.
I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of California, and I also am a CCM, which is a certified case manager. Just so you are aware, I'm a commissioner on the National Board of Directors for the Commission for Case Management Certification Education, and so I represent about 60,000 board certified case managers nationally. What I do professionally, I actually work full-time in a medical setting where I manage end-of-life care for 2 hospitals. And so my patients come into the hospital and usually go pretty quickly because they're so very ill and they just have no reserve. And I see the results of people not having planned well. It's always amazes me whenever I'm talking with someone who's in their 90s and they have not even talked about funeral arrangements, let alone actually done anything about putting things in place. And my question is always, well, were you thinking you were going to live forever? But anyhow, so that's one aspect of that I help with in the hospital environment, because it's usually more pressing and people need to have at least made some decisions. But more so as a care manager, which is the profession that Pete is referring to, we do a lot of different things. And as a consumer of healthcare resources, it certainly is quite valuable for you to actually have access to someone who's either a nurse care manager or a social work care manager, somebody that has the background in taking care of and helping seniors kind of navigate kind of the troubled waters of end-of-life care. This is not easy stuff, and I want you to know I'm very sensitive to the fact that some of you just don't want to do it.
My mother was one of those. She says, if you bring up the topic of dying one more time, she was going to delete me from her entire estate.
I'm going to share one thing, and thank you, Pete, for allowing me to just have a small commercial. This is the book that I've published. It's the second iteration of the book, Dying 101. candid conversation on terminal illness. But I want to share with you that I was on television at the cable station in Laguna Woods Village and did several presentations and interviews and things like that all last year. And the purpose was really to market the book and see if people would be interested in purchasing it and things like that. We spent, I'm not even going to say how much we spent in terms of the advertising budget, but there was access to 30,000 people above the age of, needing this kind of service. I want to ask, Pete, you're the only one that can answer this question, but I want to ask just for all of you to think about, how many books do you think I sold? I mean, we were on over the course of a couple of months. People knew who I was. They liked the presentations, but how many books do you think we sold?
I would say
6.
6?
I would say 3.
3?
And one of the Q&A questions, incidentally, was 100.
100. Well, I'm going to tell you, none. Not a single book.
See?
sold.
Nobody wants to talk about death and dying.
Nobody.
Nobody. Including, by the way, doctors. Doctors have a hard time.
Who incidentally, the one comment on the 100 was from a doctor.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I want you to know, and that's kind of how I've been I'm not as pushy about the book. If you want the book, super. There's actually, if you go online on YouTube and just type in Dying 101, you'll see topics about the book, and you can watch it for free. It's actually myself and my co-author Gail, and they're, in all honesty, they're quite entertaining, if I do say so myself. And I'm retiring soon. This is something that will live forever, and because it's on Amazon on Kindle, so people want to buy it there. But really, I know that this is a hard book to read. That's kind of that we created it. It's just it covers a lot of stuff that's very difficult to discuss.
But I've hired you for a variety of different clients, and people don't know really why you're important. How much do you charge? Does it covered by insurance? And what do you actually do if they hire you?
Well, one of the things that I like to do, and it's more short-term work, so I'm only going to see people for an hour or two, maybe over the course of a couple of sessions, but I'm really doing interventions, and interventions with often the family has hired me to help with a loved one that is changing. Things are changing with this person's healthcare or their cognitive status, or they no longer can live alone, or they need caregivers or things of that nature. And so I actually help people navigate arranging for placement, arranging for caregivers in the home, having difficult conversations about end-of-life care, making sure that you put the legal pieces in place. Some of the things that I help people with they don't cost an awful lot of money. I mean, you can get an advanced healthcare directive completed for free. If you have it notarized, you're going to pay your $10 to have the notary fee. But at the end of the day, hospitals will give you the forms for free. Let me see.
But how do you charge, Michael?
My hourly rate is $150 an hour, and
is it covered by insurance?
It is not.
Okay, so if somebody needs some
as a note, incidentally, to be commercial for this, there's the book on Amazon, so it's not hard to find.
Nope.
Okay.
And people have always said, why black? And it's like, well, I'm being honest.
Yeah, okay. That's true. If somebody needs help at the time that they're severely ill, or they have dementia, or there's conflicts within the family as to what's the best medical care, where placement is, are you the only individual available? Do you belong to an organization where people can find you, other people like you?
Absolutely. There is a phenomenal organization called the Aging Life Care Association. It used to be the Geriatric Care Managers group, but essentially it's now the Aging Life Care Professionals. And there's a website. We'll actually have it we have it in one of the slides, but it gives you access by just typing in a zip code to anywhere from half a dozen to several dozen people that you can choose from. Some are nurses, some are social workers, some are people who call themselves gerontologists. You know, we basically help families kind of navigate. I've used the word navigate a number of times because I always tell people you're kind of in troubled waters and you need to have someone who could be the captain of the ship. And that's kind of what I do, at least for the time that they've hired me. A lot of times patients don't want what I have to offer because it's usually the family that's driving this bus. So I help, you know, the patient or the loved one who's having some difficulty understanding what's going to happen. I help them understand, you know, what kind of things can make them more safe in their home, or if they're no longer safe in the home, have them go to another setting.
Yeah, and this is you know, the medical business is an industry, and it's there are some nonprofits involved, but there are also for-profits involved. Doctors don't work for free. Medicare is hard to figure out. So let's get and medical care planning. There's a number that we kind of have to look at as part of your financial plan. So let's get into your outline, Michael.
Okay.
Share screen.
Am I sharing?
Not yet.
Oh, good Lord.
Technical.
Okay. There we go. And there. And
hey, there you go.
We're cooking with oil.
Yeah. Let's go to the next slide.
Planning, facilitating rich end-of-life conversations. And so that's kind of what I do, is help people talk.
And talking is important.
What is a care manager? They come from various backgrounds with diverse qualifications, education, and experience. Some people do just what I do, which is very limited. A couple of sessions to kind of help families move along, you know, the continuum. I may get involved initially to help them with one aspect and then be re-accessed at some later point to do that. Some of the patients, the clients that I've worked with Pete and others in his group, have needed a little more attention, probably more from a psychosocial standpoint, and helping people kind of come to some level.
Yes, because we don't know the language of the industry, and we don't work and operate in that area. And so you need somebody like yourself. And it's not you know, we need you for 8 hours per day. It's just kind of run by as to what we're doing and say, are we going in the right direction?
I do an awful lot of education about community resources that are available. I always can kind of give people an idea of how much are these things going to cost and different options that are available. Sometimes people think that, you know, I have Medicare, it covers everything.
Let's go to the next slide.
These are problem solvers who both anticipate and respond to the challenges of aging and related conditions. So what can care managers do? They holistically assess needs and develop a proactive plan, coordinate care and services, including any follow-up, supporting the continuity of care, acts as a liaison between everybody that's involved, promote health and prevent illness, and really have difficult conversations with them. What kind of care do you really want? I'll share with you that recently my mother ended up in the hospital in ICU and had a very severe pneumonia, bilateral pneumonia. And at the time of all of the assessments, they found out that she has lung cancer. And it's a mass in her lungs. But one of the things that she did shortly after being told that she had this mass in her lungs is she sat down with the physician and said, I don't want you to do anything. And they're like, you know, she's already anticipating that they're going to want to push chemotherapy or radiation, things of that nature. And she says, I'm 91 and a half. Why would you do that to me? She says, I'm already bored out of my mind. Why are you eliminating the one opportunity that I have to leave the planet? Please leave me alone. And so I've been advocating for her for 15 years, and I've been her power of attorney. And my goal is to really make sure that she has decent quality of life as she navigates this final chapter of her life. So some care managers actually are very involved in monitoring almost on a daily basis what's going on from a medication management service, caregiving and things of that nature. So
I've used a care manager just to come in once a month just to put together the pill boxes because the client had so many medications that they needed to take and they would get confused. And she could come in, train the caregiver as to what medications to take on a daily basis.
One of the things that I can kind of, if you can wrap your brain around one particular word or a title, these are professional relatives. These are people that could be your relative, could be your son or your daughter, your husband or your wife, but these are people who would step in and help you kind of navigate the stuff that's going on and be able to have real honest conversations with you. You know, at the bottom of this slide, it says mediate family conflicts. How often are families conflicted? Almost all the time.
Yes, that's normal, by the way. It's not abnormal.
No, and you can multiply that by a factor of 10 if there's money involved.
Yes.
So be prepared.
Yes. Yeah. And nobody talks about this stuff. And we're lacking knowledge of what it's about, the process of dying. Let's go to the next slide.
This is the how to find a care manager. It's aginglifecare.org. You can see over on the right-hand side, find an aging life care expert. When you click on that, you actually open up another window, you put in the zip code, and it'll present you with photographs of the folks who are available to be hired.
Please pass this slide to as many people as you may know. People don't know about this profession. They think that their present doctor or primary care physician or hospital, or we're going to talk about skilled nursing facilities, that's their only resource.
I can tell you that a very short involvement, maybe a 2-hour session to get people kind of clear on everything that they need to know about this process would be worth it for anybody that's watching this. You need to have somebody who's going to be able to say, gosh, you know, I can see that you have you've had problems with emphysema or congestive heart failure or something like that. Let's kind of map out what kind of things you need to be aware of as things progress, because things are going to continue to progress.
Yeah, and what you're going to hear me say this a number of times throughout this presentation, but who needs to know how to find a care manager? Well, it's your agent for your healthcare, because if you are in a situation where you're in the throes of a medical crisis, you're not going to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know, let's discuss my health. So make sure your agent for your healthcare, who normally is a family member, has this contact information.
Absolutely. And what he's talking about is a person that you have identified on an advance directive that is a surrogate decision maker. They're basically a person who will be contacted if you can't speak up. They would be contacted and be the one to represent your issues and your needs and things of that.
Let's go to the next slide, Mike.
Okay.
Okay, this is really important because this is the terminology in the industry.
Everybody, you know, people don't realize all the different levels of care and how you meet the criteria to be in each level of care. A lot of people know about acute hospitals because they've possibly been to the hospital with something serious. They might have gone 911 because they've had a heart attack or some major event, and they're admitted to the acute care hospital. And they could be anywhere in that building. I mean, we've got the Saddleback Memorial Medical Center where I work, where you can be, you know, come in through the emergency room and go directly to the ICU because your situation is so severe. How long are you going to stay in the acute care hospital?
And who's going to pay for that?
Your insurance will pay for the acute care hospital.
And what if you have Medicare?
If you have Medicare, they will pay a portion, and there may be co-pays, and there may be co-insurance that you have to pay whenever you're on Medicare.
Okay, but it used to be a person stayed in the hospital until they felt better.
Actually, it's as soon as the doctor feels better.
Okay, so in order, acute care is you need to be in the hospital and you're going to get discharged as soon as possible. Is that a correct statement?
You're going to get discharged as soon as you no longer meet criteria to be in the acute setting. And the acute setting is acute medical management. You need to have all the supports that are available in a hospital. The next level of care is called skilled care or rehabilitation settings. If you've stayed in the hospital long enough to qualify, you may be suggested to go to a skilled nursing facility where you'll have an opportunity to have some rehabilitation services, occupational therapy, physical therapy. You may have IVs continuing for antibiotics, things of that nature. Basically, they call them rehab facilities, but they're essentially nursing homes. And they have a Medicare section, then they have the long-term care section, and most people who are in the long-term care section of the nursing home are covered under Medi-Cal.
Yeah, and then and you can get under Medicare if you've been in an acute care hospital for 3 days plus 1 day for the admission. So it's essentially 4 days. You will receive 20 days of rehab care at no extra charge. Right. It's fully paid for by Medicare. Correct.
And if you need more care beyond that, you can have care from day 21 to 100, but there's going to be a copay.
Copay.
It could be pretty significant. It could be several $100s. But certainly the miracle of miracles is how many people get better on day 20. My mother was in a skilled nursing facility after her event at the hospital, and she miraculously got better on day 19. I was shocked. It was just like a miracle had occurred.
I know, because they tell you that, gosh, your mom has plateaued. She will likely not get any better.
Yeah.
And by the way, that is not a Medicare criteria. Plateauing is a marketing term that skilled care facilities use. So be sure to
a lot of the reasons why they do that is because people can't afford the copay.
Yeah.
And they're not qualifying for Medi-Cal. And so people are generally sent to another level of care from the rehabilitation setting. They could go home with skilled care at home if they qualify. They could stay in the nursing facility under custodial care. And if they have either pay privately or pay or they have Medi-Cal that would pay for the nursing facility.
You have a slide on custodial care, I believe, on the ADLs. Let's go into that because I don't think people understand. Yeah. Okay, let's do first Medicare and then we'll go to custodial care.
Medicare is health insurance for those 65 and over, as well as those who have specific healthcare conditions and have been disabled for a period of time, and they can be under age 65. People don't realize this, but if you're 2 years on disability, Social Security disability, you automatically qualify for Medicare. Medicare Part A is hospitalization, skilled nursing, hospice, and home health. You can only pick one. You can't have more than one going on at the same time. So if you are in the hospital, you are using Part A benefits, and then if you transition to skilled nursing facilities, you're going to be on Part A benefits. And if you go to hospice, you're on Part A benefits, but you can't be the only way that you can be in hospice in the hospital is if you're on my service, which is the general inpatient level of care. Yeah. But Part A Medicare covers the bulk of the services that we're talking about from acute care until you are rehabilitated and sent home.
And then each setting, whether it's hospital, skilled care, or hospice, you'll have a different medical doctor in charge. Right. And your primary care physician is not going to be in charge of you as you go through these different settings. And right. Again, it makes it really important to have a navigator, to have an advocate who is your healthcare agent that knows you, what prescriptions, drugs that you're on, what you want, to tell the hospitalist, if you're in the hospital, the medical director at the skilled nursing facility, or the doctor who's in charge of you under hospice, your wishes, what you want.
Right, absolutely. And I want you to also be aware that there's a possibility that you could be at the hospital in the emergency room and appear to be in a bed that you're admitted to, only to find out that you were brought in on observation. So you're not even considered a hospital patient at that point in time, because either the physician who sees you in the emergency room just does not feel that you meet criteria for acute care hospital. And so they're just going to have you in for observation for 24 hours, and you're not going to.
You can be under observation for 3 days before you are officially admitted.
Yeah. And so my mother actually was admitted for the time period that she needed so that she could go to skilled nursing with good coverage. And so she was able to go from that standpoint. And then what happened is that she was then felt that they couldn't continue to keep her in the skilled nursing facility. She went home with home health, and she proceeded to fire everybody who came into the house.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. Yeah. Is there, let's say, do people get discharged from the hospital or from the skilled nursing facility too early?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And
so what does a person do if they feel like they're being discharged too early?
Well, you can appeal. One of the things that they have to advise you of every one of these levels of care is that if they're going to discharge you, they have to give you they have to give it to you in writing, and they also have to tell you that you have the ability to appeal to an objective third party called Levanta, and they will determine if you really should have been maintained in the acute setting or the skilled nursing facility or hospice. But they're going to be reviewing your documentation and the medical records separate from, they're going to have that stuff sent to them, and they will make a determination as to whether or not you win your appeal or you don't.
Yeah.
If you don't win the appeal, you're going to be paying privately for some care, potentially, or you're going to involve a family member.
Yeah, I would recommend highly. I've used this telephone number, and it's written on the discharge papers. Correct. So it's there readily available to you. But talk to the medical doctor in charge and explain why you feel that the discharge is too early. These individuals are super busy, and you just got to take the time out and say, hey, I don't feel that this person should be discharged this early because they just fell out of the bed, they can't walk, or, whatever the reason is. And usually they'll give you another 24 hours without even calling the 800 number.
But I can tell you that I have encouraged families to appeal on multiple occasions. And I say to them, if you do appeal and you win the appeal, we're not going to be upset. We have to, as a hospice provider, we actually have to meet criteria. And if we feel that you're kind of borderline appropriate for the care, I still encourage families to apply for the appeal. And because sometimes the appeal process says, you know what, this person still is appropriate for services, and so the appeal was granted. And so that actually helps. That helps the service that you're under, because then they don't have to fight the fact that they're actually going to get reimbursed now because there's been an appeal.
And everything is
everybody wants.
Yeah. And, hospitals and skilled nursing facilities, they want to be reimbursed. They're putting out expenses. What is Part B? Part
B is physician services, outpatient care, equipment, supplies. There's a lot of things that are now being done with respect to advanced care planning, where physicians and people like myself can have conversations with people that are documented and available to help people kind of navigate the troubled waters that are coming.
And Part C?
Part C is the Medicare Advantage plan. So, and a good example that most people understand is SCAN. SCAN is an excellent program because they provide, not only do they provide all the services under A, B, C, and D, but they also will do things like transportation, some caregiving services, a variety of things that, the Silver Sneakers programs are all usually part of the Medicare Advantage plans, where they're paying for all these services so that you have access to them.
So when you turn 65, the government under Medicare pays SCAN $1,000 per month, and then SCAN in return takes care of your medical needs. Right. Is that the way it works?
Absolutely. Their goal is to financially manage the money, because it's not about them saying no. It's about them saying yes with maybe some modifications or things like that, so that people get the care that they need for the time period that they need them. A lot of times people have really our custodial care, and it's going to take some time to kind of transition that person. So Part C is, in all honesty, if you're in the acute phase of your illness, Part C is probably not a bad idea in terms of, having Part C, because they're
What
going
about what is a PPO versus an HMO?
PPO is where you're going to still have control over who you see as a physician and other services. You get to pick your own. It's a preferred provider organization versus an HMO, which is a health maintenance organization. Now, someone like myself, I'm approaching into my 60s, but I know the system. So the less expensive plan is going to be the health maintenance organization, like a Kaiser or a Scan or something like that. But I know how to navigate that system. If you don't know how to navigate that system, or have someone who can help you navigate the system, you could get into trouble.
Yeah. And what I'm finding is in this last year, that being under Medicare with a supplement is actually the best way to go if you're having major medical issues. Because they don't have to call the Scan or the HMO to get permission to do the service. So
my mother has a PPO. She knows the value of having a PPO, and she's needed it for the last 20 years because she's had, one bout of cancer. She's now got the things going on now. She has seen the same physician for 20 years. That is almost unheard of today.
Yeah, this is really important. Another important slide, because HICAP, what is that?
Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy Program. It's been around for, I want to say, about 3 decades. It's been through the Council on Aging. It's bias-free information on Medicare. And I really encourage you that if you have lots of questions about Medicare, how it operates, I would encourage you to call the hotline or call the Orange County number. These are really good people who are going to help you deal with just specifically Medicare and the plans that come after Medicare.
Yeah, lots of volunteers. They're there for you. It's objective. So it's done at no charge. They run the Ombudsman program here in Orange County. If you have a long-term care policy and you don't know exactly what it says, HICAP is there to kind of help you out with that. Wonderful, wonderful organization.
Absolutely.
That's there for you.
Is HICAP national?
It is, but it's run state by state.
Yeah.
But if I call the 800 number, will it be a national number to refer?
You're going to get
sure
a nice
about that.
because Medicare doesn't change from state to state.
Yeah. I'm
Thank
not
you.
sure, Don, on the 800 number, but somebody can give it a call and find out. They would know if you call the 800 number, you tell them that you need help in X state. I'm sure that they can get help for you in that state.
Thank you.
Next slide, please.
Long-term care.
Okay, here we go. This is custodial care, folks. This is the stuff you need to know, because long-term care, does ordinary Medicare cover you under this?
No, not typically. It's, the places that you'd like to go are not paid for by Medicare.
So this is all private pay.
And I don't anticipate that changing.
No.
I don't anticipate there's too many people who need care, and there's a lot of people who can afford to pay for care, but long-term care is mostly you're admitted to a program like a long-term care setting because you have.
Or you could be at home.
Yeah, no, of course. You have the inability to perform activities of daily living, also known as ADLs, without assistance. Activities of daily living include bathing, dressing, toileting, continence, transferring and ambulation, and eating. These, if you have deficiencies in at least 2 of these areas, you're going to be eligible for some long-term care services. So it could be in a skilled nursing facility in the long-term care section. It could be as a resident of a small board and care or assisted living, It could be home care in the home setting. It could be how you claim on your long-term care policy if you happen to have one.
This is the language that they use. And most of your caregivers or the long-term caregivers happens to be women.
Yeah.
Happens to be in a marital situation. And they're carrying around somebody who weighs over 200 pounds to help them bathe, to help them dress, to help them toilet, to help them with continence, help them with cognition. And guess what? What's the statistic on women caring for men under a long-term care situation?
It's pretty significant. And I can tell you the one thing that you have to be careful of is the person who's identified as the caregiver, they can die.
40% die before the person that they're caring for.
Why isn't there an item in here on long-term on ADLs for mental capacity? Is that because it causes these other things?
Yes. And it's considered cognition,
Right.
lacking capacity, but it's not listed as a separate. Some long-term care policies have it included, but many don't.
Part of the reason is that a lot of programs basically automatically you qualify for whatever services that are being offered because you have dementia or Alzheimer's or something related. And so that's why it's kind of separated, because if you have dementia, it's your golden ticket. I mean, certainly it's not pleasant to be demented, but the reality is that it automatically qualifies you for long-term care.
But most long-term care policies are not in existence any longer. And we'll talk a little bit more about the insurance policies, but who, again, usually a family member it's providing the care, or people hire caregivers.
Yes. And the cost of care has really gone up exponentially. I mean, it's just really, COVID really caused a lot of problems from that standpoint, but people are just shocked, absolutely shocked as to how much a caregiver is charging per hour through an agency.
Yeah.
On this list, is this list really not for Medicare at all? This is for private pay?
Well, this is how everybody kind of looks at patients who are coming in from a care standpoint. What can they and can they not do? What do they need assistance with? And when you go down the list and you can actually talk with the family members that are providing the care, what's this person need assistance with? And so once you have kind of an idea, then every level of care that you go, they're gonna want to know, what are they capable of doing?
If you go into an assisted care facility, they'll ask you what, they may not say, hey, what's your ADLs, but this is what they're looking for. And they'll charge you accordingly,
Right.
depending on the ADLs that you need.
But this is beyond Medicare.
Oh, definitely.
Always, yeah.
Thank you.
Always. It's private pay. And so I'm paying right now for a client $17,000 per month because she needs assistance with 3 or more of the ADLs. Board and cares usually charge similarly. Caregivers, on the other hand, usually are just absolutely miracle workers, and they take care of all of these, but the cost is somewhere between $22 to $35 an hour. I would say on an annual basis, it's somewhere around between $100,000 to $200,000 per year. How long?
Not more.
Yeah,
So
or
how do
more.
I pay for this? Next slide.
Lottery tickets. Paying for long-term care. Self-insure. I have decided I'm not going to buy a long-term care policy. It's so cost prohibitive. I'm going to just self-insure. And so, but to do that, and this is something that some of you may have even thought about, I have to sell the house and move. So that's the only way that it's going to happen for me. I'll have quite a bit of money available to me, but I would not have that available if I stayed in Southern California, unless I did a reverse mortgage or something like that. But
yeah, this is financial planning 1 that we talked about. You have to know your net worth. You have to understand your cash flow. Michael was just talking about and saying, hey, I've got a lot of cash tied up in my home. And so if I sell that, move to a smaller place, I can have the cash flow to pay for my ADLs. But it's very difficult. I mean, Michael, you're great because you kind of separated your mind from the emotional side to the practical side and figured this out. But if you're in a crisis at the moment, the thing that I hear the most from elder individuals, I want to stay at home, no matter what the cost is.
Yeah. The next bullet point is die before you need long-term care assistance.
Well,
most people think that's what's going to happen.
And they do. You know, the statistic is that if you're 85 and older, that you will have a need for long-term care for 3 months or less. Now, that's average. How that applies to your situation, we don't know.
And Pete, you bring up a very good point, because in terms of people's ability to manage this aspect, they've got to have these conversations about how much is it going to cost? Can I plan for 3 months or longer of disability? Because
I say plan for 3 years. You know, so have at least $300,000 to $500,000 set aside that you can tap into if you're self-insuring, or you can make an arrangement with your children. Yeah. My mother said, if I had to live with you, I'd rather die. But that's my mom. You know, the good news there was my older sister, we created what do they call a separate unit at her house where she lived for her
ADU.
ADU for the last 10 years of her life, and it worked out wonderfully. Yeah. So, but you got to think of this stuff. You know, we say here, transfer the cost to an insurance company. You know, long-term care policies probably are not available any longer. And the cost is so prohibitive.
If you're above a certain age, you no longer qualify. And even if you did qualify, you would not want to pay the premiums. They're outrageous. Yeah. And things have changed so dramatically in the last couple of years with respect to COVID and the cost of care. No one could have anticipated it.
Yeah. Government benefits is Medi-Cal, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
I was going to say, because we're now incredibly depressed. So the question is, I think a few slides ahead of us, and if I don't have the expensive house and I don't have the insurance, then what?
Medi-Cal. If you're completely
let's go a couple slides forward.
Yeah. Long-term care insurance. Make sure you don't avoid the specific disease policies. And what I'm talking about is that quack AFLAC company. Become a stockholder in that company. Don't buy specific disease, because if your death certificate doesn't indicate that specific disease, then you're not covered. Determine the financial health of an insurance company. You probably should do that if you have a long-term care policy with not one of the majors. Make sure you do that. There's some policies that have an age limit. In other words, they won't let you buy it unless you're 75 and in good health. Others do not. Any insurance contract, there's a 30-day right to rescind, and that is insurance companies write these policies for other attorneys. They do not write them for us normal people to read. And therefore, because they're so complicated and they use so much legalese and it could be predatory, that they say you can rescind that contract for any reason after you sign for up to 30 days. Okay, be careful. Next slide. Let's go to, there's no longer a California partnership policy. So let's go to the next slide. This is how they determine your fees on a long-term care policy. One is elimination period. When does it kick in? The rate drops dramatically if you have to pay for your first 3 months. And the reason for that is most people only need 3 months of long-term care. If you have it out longer, your premiums drop dramatically.
Here's a piece of information that some people may not be aware of, but you get automatic claiming. You get automatically the elimination period is eliminated if you are placed on hospice, and that's often buried in the contract. You'll see that if you go on hospice, then you're automatically starting to get reimbursed.
Great tip, Michael, because we're going to talk about hospice in a little bit. Aged, these contracts are daily reimbursement amounts. So the higher you go, the higher the premium. Because like caregiving is also charged sometimes on a daily rate or on a weekly rate for 24/7 care.
And I'm assuming that the elimination period is from the beginning of your incapacitation. It's not an annual thing. It's from your beginning.
No, you are re-examined usually by a separate nursing association, probably about once a year. Length of coverage is what I'm seeing mostly is 3 years maximum. There are some policies out there that do lifetime, and there's some policies out there to say, hey, you have $1 million to spend, and once you get through the million, that's it. For those individuals who have it, it's been wonderful. But get this, less than 1% of people who have long-term care insurance use it. There's 2 reasons for that. One is the healthcare agent doesn't realize there's a policy, and people die before they get a chance to use it. So if you have a long-term care policy, put it with your estate planning documents and make sure you understand what 2 ADLs or 3 ADLs kick in the policy. You paid a lot of premiums. You make sure that you can use it if the time comes when you need it.
There'll be a case manager, a care manager that will come to your home and do an evaluation of you. And you have got to meet criteria at that point in time, because they're going to die. Their goal is really to report back to the insurance company whether or not you qualify. And if you don't qualify, you don't qualify.
The insurance company is not going to call you to say, hey, do you need long-term care policy kicked in? So make sure your healthcare agent or your trustee understands and knows what this is about. Let's go to the next slide.
Medi-Cal provides custodial care for people with low income and limited ability to pay, includes the aged, the blind, the disabled, young adults and children, pregnant women, persons in skilled nursing facilities or intermediate care homes. Assets are typically protected. So for the surviving spouse, the home, a vehicle, the burial plan, things of that nature.
So you could have today you can have a $5 million home. You can have a Lamborghini. You could have a burial plan where you want doves to come out of the grave when they open it up for you. And you can have $1,500 in your bank account. And you could still qualify for Medi-Cal. So the problem is that the law is going to be changing. They're trying to change it now, and they will look back 36 months to see what you have as far as assets are concerned. There are some really unscrupulous people out there who try to get you to become Medi-Cal qualified. Please avoid them. You have to give up all of your assets, most of your assets, to one of your family members, and many a times it's involved with an annuity salesperson that sells annuities to your kids. So be thankful that we have Medi-Cal. And what is it called in other states, Michael?
Medicaid.
Medicaid. And Medi-Cal is just a little different only because California pays a little bit more. It
Right.
is a wonderful, wonderful program because we don't want people dying on the streets sometimes that we have today.
If you qualify for Medi-Cal, you will also qualify for in-home supportive services. And in-home supportive services is money that pays for a caregiver to be in the home. And so it could be 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day. It's generally never what you need, but it's enough to pay a family member to feel okay
Assist.
about that. And so
Yeah.
they can assist. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot today is family members who have, as a group, they've decided, okay, Mary, you're going to be the caregiver, and all the family will support Mary so that Mary is able to manage grandma and grandpa and all that stuff. And so that you've got it all contained within the family system. And that person, Mary, is going to be paid for out of the in-home supportive services, and then maybe supplemented by other family members so that no one else has to do the work.
But you have to make these arrangements and you have to talk about it.
Absolutely, and you've got to have this conversation, and it's not an easy conversation.
No, and what happens many a times is that the person, maybe there's one family member who's willing to step up and care for you. And as the parent all of a sudden realizes that there's only one member of the family that's caring for him. So they change their estate plan and give the person who's caring for him more monies or more percentage of the estate.
Yeah.
And this creates all sorts of legal problems and conflict within the family, or undue influence, et cetera, et cetera. Yes.
Pete, let's back up slightly for Medi-Cal, rather. So I'm assuming these limits or other things, the houses, the dollars, the $1,500, whatever, is for an individual, or does this also mean with spouse, or what is
For
that?
an individual.
Okay.
Remember in California, it's a community property state. So the community spouse is not have to pay for the other.
So I can give my wife all the cash
No,
and not have it count?
no, you can't. That's a gift between them. There's all sorts of regulations
And it's changing too.
and it's changing. So the whole Medicare system has what's called eligibility workers, people who are just there to determine whether or not you become eligible for Medi-Cal. And I would say, don't wait until the last minute. Maybe start planning for it 6 months to a year prior to begin the process. And there are people that you can hire that can assist you in getting that, getting qualified.
Options for long-term care. All of these things listed are private pay. You may have some, if you have long-term care insurance policy, there's certain things that you might get covered there, but for the majority of you, just understanding that you're probably going to be paying out of pocket for all of these services.
Assisted care comes in two different varieties. One is the larger facilities like Belmont Village, Covington, Sunrise, huge businesses. Some of them are glorified hotels. They charge anywhere from $10,000 to $45,000 per month. So those are the large assisted care facilities. The other ones are the small bed facilities. There's over 6,000 here in Orange County alone. And these are licensed under the board and care regulations, and the maximum amount of number of people that can have is 6.
And I'll be honest with you, this is where I like to direct people to, especially if they need any care. If they need care to, if they need help to get to the bathroom, they need help with feeding and things like that, they're qualifying based upon they're needing assistance with activities of daily living. the small 6-bed facility is going to be more economical for you to go to, even though the price is the price. I always say location, location, location. If you're going to a facility that's in Newport Beach, Corona Del Mar, you're going to pay $10,000, $12,000 a month for a 6-bed facility. Inland, and the further inland that you go, the price drops. The lowest that I've seen is 2,500, but you can still see places in inland areas that are going to be 7,000, 8,000 easily. And they generally will, that person's, the cost of the care is not going to go up so dramatically, but based upon what care needs change, because they're going to assume you need care whenever you are first admitted. People don't go into these facilities, in the small facilities, completely independent. It would not be, they would not be comfortable because everybody else is very dependent.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that you need a place that is like kind. We are social animals. Yeah. And we need other people. So it would be terrible. I'll give you an example. I received a call from an individual in a small bed facility, and she goes, I got myself placed in here from the emergency room at the hospital, and everybody speaks Japanese here. And she goes, I can't communicate with anyone. And so, you need to find a place that fits your personality and also your medical condition. You need to communicate with people. And these small bed facilities, some of them are absolutely excellent, and they range just like everything else all the way to super poor. So it's, again, you need an advocate, your agent for your health care. You need them to be involved in helping you place someone. And sometimes these places are better than home because you have a family meal. You have somebody else to talk to. You have outings. You have activities that they do. Sometimes we get stuck in the mud when we say, we don't want to leave our home for any reason whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. No, and one of the things I want to make sure that you understand about in-home care is people can hire people privately and get a little bit of a discount on the hourly rate, but there are some risks that are associated with that, workers' comp, paying for taxes and other types of insurance and stuff like that. So
let's move on. Let's go to the next slide.
I like this slide. The Help for Seniors group. This is actually, this is the Your Way document. This is something that we typically give out at these seminars, or we direct people to this website so that they can get a copy of the Your Way document.
It gets a conversation started.
Yeah.
It's not a legal document, but it's a check-a-box. Number of pages. It talks about hospice care. It talks about palliative care. It's who do you want with you at the time of your death? Who do you don't want there? What family members should we get help from? It's just a conversation started. There's another document out there called 5 Wishes. They're all really good. It's just that you need to talk about this stuff.
Right. And you need to feel comfortable with having the conversation with your family members, because it's going to determine how things go for you. If you don't have these conversations, you get what you get. The default is to do everything.
Yes. The court will not remove life support. What is a POLST?
POLST is physician orders for life-sustaining treatment, and it is a document that is available in most states. I want to say that I think it's universally available across the United States. There's some slight differences to the document in different states, but for the most part, it literally covers all of the things that you would need to know in an emergency situation. So, do you wish to be resuscitated? What is the intensity of the care that you would like to receive? from full treatment to custodial or comfort care? Do you wish to have a feeding tube or have artificial nutrition or hydration provided? Post is a document that, and I'll give you my own background. I was on the board of directors in 2009 that developed the form for the state of California, and I was responsible for teaching physicians across the state on how to have these conversations with patients and their families. Because at the end of the day, that's really who should be having this conversation, is the physician. And if there is not a physician available to have these conversations, social workers can have the conversation, nurse practitioners can have the conversation and sign off on the document as if they were a physician, and physician assistants can do that as well. But this, I tell people that this conversation surrounding POST really is the initial palliative care consult. It is what people who are on palliative care generally should be thinking about in advance, because these are things that
how long in advance, Michael?
18 months is generally the surprise question. If you thought this person would die within 18 months, then they should complete this document. The surprise question that you ask if the person's appropriate for hospice is, would you be surprised if this person died within 6 months? That's kind of those are two kind of reference points in terms of dealing with both of those issues.
Yeah, people think that, is the next slide about hospice?
No, it's furthermore.
Okay, let's talk about this, yeah.
The difference between Advanced Healthcare Directive and the POST document, advanced directives kind of look like this. And the primary thing that they're wanting to get out of an Advanced Healthcare Directive is it names a medical decision maker. It names somebody that can make decisions for you, and it does
legal authority.
Gives them the permission to do all these things. POST, and I have a copy of it here, is for seriously ill or frail at any age, and it's specific orders for current treatment, so things that are happening now. So a lot of times these are filled out in the hospital environment, and so they're asking people, how do you feel about these things? What are the goals of your care? What would you like to see happen, as you move along this continuum of care?
Yeah. So we're looking at POST 18 months, year, when you feel that you've gotten to a particular age of, and usually it's when you have a specific medical condition, Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's is kind of difficult, but Parkinson's, stroke, a specific disease. Many of us are just going to die in our sleep. Okay, and nobody's going to make any money off our deaths or fear of dying. That is a normal death, and many of us will have that. The issue today is, we have such wonderful medical machines that can keep the heart going, that can keep you alive. And so, at what point is your quality of life diminished to such a point where death is probably the better answer than living? Yeah. And probably, Michael, you've been involved in those kind of conversations.
One of the things that has come up in these presentations recently is the whole idea of the physician end of life option in California. So in 2016, it became legal in California to actually have your physician assist you with the end of your life and helping you from a suicide standpoint. Now, they don't call it suicide whenever you go through this process, but the reality is that a physician will write you, after they've taken you through the process, they will write a prescription for a lethal dose of medication that you're instructed to provide or to administer yourself. I actually am often the person that is consulted whenever people are initially asking for this service. And so my first question that I ask of them is, why are you thinking about this now? What's changed? Is there something going on that we might be able to help with now, so that we're not waiting until the couple of weeks that it's going to take to get you through this process? But let's find out if there's something that we can do now. One of the things, just to talk about the slides, is that 25% of Americans have recorded their medical care wishes in a legal document. A lot of people think that it's morbid, it's depressing, it predicts the future. They think it involves an attorney, and it does not. You're not at that age. I think anybody that drives on the freeway should have an advanced healthcare directive. The cost of it is, if you go to the hospital, they will give it to you for free. You don't know what to write. All these documents kind of help you walk through them. And if you're intimidated by them, have your family member help you with it.
What I find too is that so many individuals might have an advanced healthcare directive, but they've spent 10 to 15 minutes or less talking to the healthcare agent as to what they want. And what happens when their crisis occurs and there's more than one family member, then we hear language, well, we don't want to give up on you.
Right.
Let's
Can't
talk
do
one
nothing.
other operation. You know, it's and it's a slow slope until the end of life. And I think this part of the conversation is that that's not a normal death.
Yeah, no, I think that we really want to have these conversations because we want people to know that they actually do have some control over this process. Not so much, taking it all the way to the point of ending their life intentionally, but also just having the right kind of services available to them. If you don't have these conversations, the default is to treat aggressively, even if you don't want it. If nobody knows what your wishes are, the goal is going to be, you're going to be on a ventilator in ICU and then your family is going to have a difficult conversation with the healthcare professionals about taking you off of these things.
Because that might kill you. So it's a whole different kind of conversation. We talked about the pulse. Let's go to the next slide.
When the plan is unclear, the default is to treat aggressively.
Yeah.
People are left with uncertainty and stress.
And by the way, at 92 years old, do you want to do CPR on the person?
No.
No.
There's a high probability of your cracking ribs, and the person is unlikely to come out of it. Over the age of 85, less than 1% of people survive CPR.
By the way, I love your slide right here because it says family may be left with. I always recommend to talk to your healthcare agent and forgive them. And what do I mean by that? Say, do your best. If you make a wrong decision, you're forgiven. It's okay, but just do your best that you can. And so this alleviates that guilt or the uncertainty, because that's all we can do. None of us can predict the future. We just want our agent to try to take everything into consideration and do their best in making that decision. Let's go to the next slide.
There's a lot of conversation tools. This organization, the coalition, ccc.org, is an excellent website to go to because it talks about all sorts of things that can help you have these conversations with a loved one. Why create an advanced healthcare directive? It's a way to make healthcare wishes known. If you're unable to communicate, it allows a person to do either or both of the following: appoint a decision maker and state instructions for future healthcare decisions.
We have approximately 10 minutes left, Michael, and I definitely want to go through what is the difference between hospice and palliative care.
One of the things, and I cover patients who are on palliative care as well as on hospice. One thing that I always am a little frustrated that physicians may respond to a family's question is, what is palliative care? And they'll say, well, it's just like hospice. It's a lighter version of hospice. Well, the truth is that palliative care hospice is a version of palliative care, the end stage version. It's what happens at the end. It's called palliative care as well.
Next slide.
There
you go.
Oh my God. See, now there's a reason why we have Don.
Yeah, well, we have God, so
Don, not God. Oh, that's right. He did say the voice of God.
Yeah, he is the voice of God.
These are two organizations that can help you kind of sort through what is the difference. You can see in the National Hospice Organization, they have palliative care in their name, which does a lot to confuse people. However, I always refer people to the website Center to Advance Palliative Care, because people can receive palliative care services in the hospital, in the community. They can hire people to help them. And primarily what we're looking at is people who have a serious illness and they're having symptoms that need to be managed. That's the primary reason why you would go to palliative care, because you're still continuing to cure, you're still continue to pursue aggressive treatment with the goals of curing what's wrong with you.
And hospice?
Hospice is if you've made the decision to just have comfort care. You're only going to have the services that are going to keep you comfortable. So morphine for pain, things for agitation, things for diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, things of that nature. So symptom management is a huge part of hospice services. Hospice is also going to provide a basket of services that are paid for by Medicare. So all the staff, you're not going to have to pay for any of the staff that are going to come. So you're going to have a registered nurse, a home health aide to help with bathing, a chaplain, a social worker, your access to a medical, a physician to kind of write orders and things of that nature. That's under hospice. Under palliative care, if you've seen one palliative care program, you've seen one palliative care program, because there's no consistency across the United States in terms of what is offered, what is provided. Now, insurance companies will pay for palliative care because the plan from the insurance company standpoint is this may be a precursor to hospice, but at least has people have a conversation about do they wish to be resuscitated? Do they want to have things like that done? Now, I want you to know that making a decision to go on to hospice or go on to have palliative care, have a conversation with you regarding CPR specifically. CPR, it means do not resuscitate. It does not mean do not treat. You can still pursue all sorts of treatment even though you have a do not resuscitate order. That DNR only triggers when your heart stops beating and you've stopped breathing. And on this document, on the Pulse document, it has the word attempt. So we're just going to attempt to do CPR. It doesn't. Do you know the number of people who actually survive CPR on television?
100% on television.
No. You still have to have some people die because it's the way the story goes. But 76% of the time, the patient survives CPR
and lives a normal life.
And they wake up after.
Yeah. And reality is?
It's less than 1%.
Less than 1%, folks.
Yeah.
It's just, please, this is an industry. And when you go on hospice care, anytime I tell somebody that the family members that I'm recommending hospice care for their patient or for their mom and dad, they say, oh, they're going to die. Does that mean is that true?
No. Do you know what the average length of time is on hospice nationally?
No, I don't.
24 days.
So people wait too long to get on hospice care.
And they think that they're going to die, when in reality, it's really about the quality of your life while you're waiting. My mother understands that. She's made a decision not to do any more chemotherapy or radiation or any of that stuff. She didn't even want them to start because her goal was really about quality of life. I'm going to involve palliative medicine in her team because I want to make sure that she has access to medications for her comfort. She's not yet ready for hospice, but that'll make a nice transition to hospice when she is.
To qualify for hospice means is that your medical doctor believes that you have a 50% chance or greater of dying within the next 6 months.
Correct.
And once you're on hospice care, you're not on. Does the HMO still get paid?
Well, what happens is that everything is covered under hospice. And so you don't need any of that stuff.
So maybe one of the reasons why people wait too long is because of the economics of the person who's advising them.
I think so. And I also think that people think that hospice is about dying and that they see a lot of the self-fulfilling prophecy that people, choose to go on hospice and then they die several days later. The number one thing that families say in the satisfaction surveys that are done after the person's died is, I wish I knew earlier about what hospice was. And so I'm always a big proponent of
me too,
getting people early on about what hospice means.
And you can get off of hospice the day after you get on. Yeah. It's not a life sentence or death sentence. No. So great resources.
Yeah.
Being Mortal is about a medical doctor who all of a sudden discovered that other medical doctors don't know a lot about death
Right.
and dying.
Yeah.
Um,
And they often mislead people because they're trying to protect people.
yeah, it's hard to have, like, you want to, doctors are just human too, you know, it's just,
And they like their patients. They
yeah,
like the people that
and they want to keep you in a positive attitude. So, you know, it's a difficult area. Dying is not easy.
I always tell people when this slide is that if you have a question that you would like to ask, you know, privately, and you don't feel comfortable doing it in this form, feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to, I can answer some questions online on the phone if you have those kind of things.
Okay, let's stop sharing the screen. And let's come on totally. And Michael, what a great presentation. From my point of view, this session is absolutely the most important because it just,
we always feel good.
Yeah,
We're done with
it's needed. Dawn, do you have any questions from the audience or from our listeners?
No, but I'm going to add one thing where Pete and I do disagree on something, which is obviously rare. My sister lives in Santa Barbara, and I'm her healthcare advocate. She has a post on her refrigerator door because if something happens to her today, I'm not going to be there when the paramedics are going to be there. And therefore, while she is not, well, she's older than me, so she's older. It is not a long-term thing for her. It's immediate care. And so Pete and I disagree a bit on that one. And so I think Pulse is very good from that standpoint. And from a hospice standpoint, I mean, it's clear that people view going on hospice as a death warrant. I'm going to die because of it.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, folks, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
It's not because you're on hospice.
Yeah,
It's that you're going to be comfortable.
20% of all hospice patients live 2 or more years. Michael, show your book again.
I want you to know that the first chapter in this book talks about getting the news. And one of the things that I want to tell you, this is perhaps the most important thing I can share with you, is never, once you've got an illness that's serious, never go to the doctors alone again, because you can't hear. When they start telling you stuff that's serious and that you need to be paying attention, you're going to only hear the first thing they've said, and then you're going to go elsewhere in terms of your thoughts. And that's the first thing that we did in this book. We talked about what it's like to get the news. What do you do when the doctor tells you you have cancer? This is brand new information, you are automatically going to teleport yourself to the death. You're going to imagine you've died. You're going to imagine what people are going to say about you as you're lying in the coffin. You know, the reality is that it takes a long time to die. When you go through this process, you're going to be asking yourself questions, and your family members are going to need information that are going to help you as you go through this process. My mother's she's got a tumor. I know that she's not going to live forever. But what I'm going to do is, as we go through this process, I'm going to bring up certain things. I'm going to have my brother involved, even though he doesn't want to be involved. I'm going to involve her neighbors. I've got 2 nurses that live next door. There's a lot of stuff that I want to basically make sure that happens because I want to control the process for my mother. Otherwise, she's left by herself, and I don't want her to be by herself in these kind of things. I know that she can handle the questions, but I've been teaching her for 20 years. So,
and she's actually listening.
yeah.
Because he started 20 years ago, Pete, not when your mother was 95. And incidentally, Michael, I've tried to help your retirement. During the session, I bought your book.
Oh, God.
I feel healthy, but I thought I'd at least get you 1 book sold. So I bought it on Amazon while we were listening to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Don, you want to go ahead and
so I thank you all very much for attending. Obviously, it is financial and estate literacy. We've been talking about medical care planning, and while parts of it have been a less than uplifting thing, it's reality, folks. And we all go through this in some form or another, and we all have stories of all kinds of things about it. So, Michael, I thank you very much.
Very well.
Next week we will do it. I'm sorry?
How big was our audience?
It still is about 30 people.
Oh, good.
Yeah. After Zoom ended, we went from 150 down to 30, but then again, there's also sessions live.
Don, do you want to do the
So therefore, what I'm going to do at this point, before Pete suggests this, is I want to thank you all very much. Next week, we will talk about estate administration, another endearing term for everyone.
Financial planning 2.
I'm sorry, I had the wrong one. That's tomorrow. Financial planning 2. Tomorrow we would be doing that because that's at your estate, where we've spent a lot of time talking about advanced healthcare directives. If you want to go back and watch a video. Thank you all very much. I'm going to stop
Thank you very much.
the recording.